How bad is climate change? Well, it's historic. It's coming to Nevada. Lake Mead in Nevada, the nation's largest reservoir by volume, reached its lowest capacity since the 1930s. The human-made lake is currently at roughly 36% of its capacity. So we've been really focused nationally on the pandemic, on public health concerns. That is definitely understandable. That said, kind of around starting this time, a lot of the country starts to experience wildfires, starts to experience droughts, and the pandemic has not done anything that makes those things less severe or less likely to occur. So we're gonna get into some of the consequences of Lake Mead being so low. But Bridget, this is a reminder, no, all of those problems that we put a lot more attention into before the pandemic, before that took so much of our public consciousness, that is still there.
Yeah, it is still there, and it's so important. I think that for a long time we talked about climate issues like some sort of abstract thing, or talked about it like, oh, save the whales or something like that. But this is urgent. We're talking about people. As we know, climate change disproportionately impacts low income people, people of color, indigenous communities. And so it is a racial justice issue. It intersects with so many issues, and it's very urgent. So I'm so glad to see you representing it on the show. And hopefully if we talk about it with the seriousness that it deserves, we'll actually get somewhere with it.
Well, thank you, I appreciate that. And it is very serious, but it's also serious for a reason that I don't think about very often when talking about this. So first, the obvious one, then we'll get to the less obvious. First of all, roughly 1 in 10 Americans depend on the Colorado River for some of their water. And the basin also provides irrigation for more than 5.5 million acres in the Southwest. So right off the bat, actual access to water for individuals, water for agriculture, this is significant. And that, look, they're focusing on this particular river because they're focusing on this particular reservoir, but the drought is real, and we're gonna show you how wide it spreads. There are very serious concerns going forward about access to water for millions and millions and millions of Americans. So that's something that we don't necessarily talk about every day. But bear in mind that when we talk about climate change, we sometimes focus on the extreme weather events like hurricanes and things like that. This is the sort of less sexy, less immediately in your face consequence that is going to have an effect on lots of communities, lots of individuals. Now that said, there is another consequence, which is access to power. In normal years, the dam that reservoir is attached to provides enough electricity for 8 million people. And according to one of the Bureau of Reclamation spokespersons, every foot of lake level decline means about 6 megawatts of lost capacity. The Hoover Dam's energy capacity has already dropped 25% by Tuesday. So it isn't just that we don't necessarily have access to the water, and that theoretically, it being down to 36% now, imagine, project out 10, 20 years and imagine what if it actually runs dry. But that is actually a very necessary source of electricity for a lot of people. And it's happening at a time where we're having this conversation about what our infrastructure priorities should be for energy production. I don't know, I kind of think this should be major news to help drive that conversation in a productive direction, Bridget.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as we said earlier in the top of the show, any infrastructure plan that does not center climate change is just not enough. And as you just laid out, talking about this water reservoir, it's like, this is people's actual lives. It's people, how we get our water, how we get our energy. We need to be talking about it urgently and sort of pretending that it's not a real problem, pretending that this is not really infrastructure, or not talking about it because it's not as sexy as things like wildfire is a real mistake.
Yeah. Exactly. And could, just like with the wildfires, could result in destruction of farms and things like that and loss of life. So let's give you a little bit more information what you might have coming up if you live in the Southwest. The record low reading, as well as expected subsequent drops in the lake, are almost certain to trigger a federal water shortage declaration later this summer, which would set off cuts in water allocations to several states. So that's gonna be fun. For individuals, also, it's gonna result in an incredible amount of political strife between different states. But it does let us act out. If you've ever had fantasies of living in Mad Max Fury Road, we're getting closer to it. And by the way, let's just jump ahead to this map of the drought to show you how bad it is. This is as of yesterday. So exceptional drought is that darkest red color that is stretching across most of a couple states. And I'm trying to see it looks like it doesn't quite hit us here in LA, but we do have extreme drought, so that's fun. Not as good as exceptional. I always want the exceptional, but that is a huge portion of the country, cities with millions and millions of people in them, and agriculture and rivers that feed, actual, like, to get our water. So I don't know, it's so significant. And again, there's the sort of, I guess, the side effect or the silver lining that this is going on when we're having a conversation about how much of our focus on legislation, the budget, and infrastructure spending should be on climate change. But it's also, by the way, happening today. We have this bipartisan group coming out, and they appear to have massively de-emphasized climate change as a part of the infrastructure bill. I don't know. And even this story, like we have an intern, Josh, who brought it to our attention. Great reporting on places like Axios and The Guardian. But is this national news? Is this to the same level as something like the DOJ investigation, which is serious? Don't get me wrong. We talked about it too. But going forward, the implications, I don't know. I feel like this deserves more attention.
I completely agree. I mean, it's so urgent, and we're barely talking about it.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.